Right, so since 2008, we've seen both the population of Calgary increase and the cost of goods and services increase, both by about 30% combined. But city spending has increased by over 60%. So what that means for businesses is that when the city spends money, it needs to raise that revenue and balance the books every year. And so it figures out what property tax rates need to be in order to raise all the money that they want to spend. And so when spending grows, property taxes need to grow as well. So each year that you increase spending more than prices and population is a year that you need to increase the amount of property taxes that you levy from the population and from businesses. And if you track what city spending would have been in, say, 2016 relative to where it would have been had spending grew just with population and prices, you'd get about $750 million less spending in 2016. So a reduction of about 20%. So it's a pretty sizable increase in city spending. So not necessarily. So I can't imagine that you would be able to reduce city spending by that $750 million without affecting the actual amount of services that the city does. But there's a lot of areas where the city could lower spending without actually changing what it does. It would really just take a look at doing what it does better and more efficiently, more cost effectively. So something that comes to mind is the general government costs. So the City of Calgary spends about $260 million a year just in general administrative, city hall administrative costs. And as a share of total city spending, that's more than double what, say, Toronto spends on the same activities. So things like human resources administration costs are quite a bit higher than other cities. The costs of maintaining the city's vehicle fleet are quite a bit higher per kilometer than other cities. And so there's a lot of ways in which city efficiency could increase without actually affecting frontline services. Another thing the city could do is to look at doing less in terms of licensing and permitting requirements. So lowering the amount of regulations that new businesses need to go through, for example, would both lower city spending and lower red tape for businesses. Right, so this is difficult to compare in that different cities have different accounting processes and face different circumstances and have different ways of operating their parks or their recreation facilities, for example. But the City of Calgary participates with a little over a dozen cities across Canada to try and benchmark their performance against each other. And Calgary does well in some dimensions, but in other big ticket items, we have very high levels of costs relative to other cities. So general government costs, the amount we spend at City Hall relative to total city spending is more than double what we see in Toronto. The costs of operating our vehicle fleet, as I mentioned, but our transit system is also quite a bit more expensive, the highest of all the cities per kind of kilometer driven of transit vehicles than any city that's in that study. HR costs, legal costs are all pretty high as well.